edition of The Loud and Devoted. My name is Native Seahawk, otherwise known as Aaron Thomas. And what the heck are the Seahawks waiting for? What are the Seahawks waiting for to get their offensive coordinator? And I think it was about 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago, I put out a podcast about saying this is probably going to be one of the biggest decisions of the 2025 and beyond seasons, because of the fact that I think we're going to have a top 10 defense next year under Coach Mike Mack. And so now I'm wondering what the heck he got. Coach Pete Carroll, congratulations to him. I'm actually going to be a secret Raiders fan this year, next couple years, to see how he builds and rebuilds that team. But you've got all these teams now that are either looking for a new head coach, or they just hired a new head coach. They're going to be looking for their offensive coordinator. We've had since the last game of the season, of the regular season, to figure out who the hell Seattle was going to take the helm after they got rid of Grubb. So what the heck? What's the big wait? And even Coach Mike Mack talked about, this year we've got the advantage because we can take the time that we need to get the guy that we need instead of having to wait till after the NFC Championship game like they did last year, or the AFC Championship game once they got Mike Mack on board, or late in the playoffs anyway. They have more time. They had more time. They've done interviews. They've done second interviews. And so what are we waiting for, you guys? That's the one thing I've been waiting for to figure out. And so I posted this morning that it's very possible that, of course, they went through the Fraley, they went through the Kubiak, they went through all these interviews, and maybe they're just like, you know what, these guys are not the right fit. You've ever applied for a job yourself and told that you didn't get the job even though you were really qualified? It's very possible that you just weren't a good fit. They interviewed you, maybe you weren't funny enough, maybe you weren't communicative enough, maybe your body language said more than what you were saying verbally. There's all kinds of reasons why folks do not get hired. And so I was trying to take a look at, maybe there's a couple of guys that they're waiting for to get done with their season to interview. But who could those be? And I said that in a couple episodes ago about who I thought would be a prime candidate, but I didn't think that they would be waiting this long to try to go after them. But it's very possible that that's what they're doing. They're waiting to see, possibly they're waiting for Bobby Johnson, the offensive coordinator or the offensive line coach for the Commanders. A lot of folks, when they hired him 2 years ago, as he was the Giants offensive line coach, they didn't like the fact that he came to Washington. But they're in the NFC Championship game. Maybe they're waiting for him. Maybe they are waiting for another guy. I'm not going for him. I don't think that he would be somebody that, if they're going to wait this long to get, maybe they're going after the Bills offensive line coach. Maybe they're going to go after Aaron Kromer, who is the offensive line coach in Buffalo. That's possible. I wouldn't think that would be a good candidate for Seattle. But again, who knows what's going on with John Schneider and Coach Mike Mack. Okay, so here's the guys that you could think would come to Seattle, and who they're waiting for is Andy Heck, offensive line coach for the Chiefs, been in the NFL for over 35 years, as a 33rd year in the NFL this year, player plus coach, was the Seahawks' first-round draft pick back when I was a teenager, and has been the offensive line coach for the Chiefs. Maybe they're waiting for Andy Heck to get done, maybe after the Super Bowl, to finally hire him as the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks. Who knows? You're going out, you're out of the tree of Andy Reid. You're part of the coaching staff that's got bolsters the number one quarterback by many people's accounts in Patrick Mahomes. They do a really good run-pass offense under Reid. Wouldn't be a bad pickup in Seattle to have somebody like with Andy Heck being the guy that they're waiting for. But here's the guy that I'm hoping that they actually go for, And maybe this is why they're waiting for so long. And some of you probably know who I'm going to talk about here is Jeff Stoutland. Jeff Stoutland is the run game coordinator, offensive line coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. And if you're going to go after offensive line, you know that's your biggest weakness. And you had Fraley at Renton at the VMAC, and you interviewed him twice, and you still didn't hire him. Maybe they're waiting for this guy, although he's probably 90 years old. No, he's not 90, but he's entering the 12th. He was in his 12th season with the Eagles this year. Many people believe that the Eagles have the best offensive line and have had the best offensive line for years under Stoutland. And so who would think that maybe possibly Jeff Stoutland could be the guy that they're waiting to interview? Not saying they're going to go with Stoutland, but not to say they're going to go for Andy Heck, but it makes you wonder, why are they waiting when they had some of the best minds at the VMAC to come in and try to become your offensive coordinator? It baffles me. Unless this is the plan and has been the plan all along, and the fact that they were able to get through several interviews like they did get a chance to do last year because they got gobbled up by the time Coach Mike Mack became the head coach, that's very possible. But here is a dark horse favorite, and you would say, well, if it's not Stoutland, it's not Andy Heck, and I think openly it's going to be probably the Eagles and the Chiefs in the Super Bowls. My thoughts on what's going to happen this year. It is very possible that Seattle goes after a man, a man that's already in the building. Scott Huff. Possibly it's Scott Huff is the man. Maybe he's the dark horse favorite. Maybe after all these interviews go through, and he's somebody that I never had on my bingo card this whole time. They kept him on, and they even asked Coach Mike Mack in his final presser, what's going on with Scott Huff? Are you letting him go? And he said, no, but we're going to hire an offensive coordinator who might bring his own offensive line coach with him. Well, maybe he's his own offensive line coach, but there you look at who else is in Seattle in terms of who else is who could possibly take his place. And let's take a look at that real quick, because I believe that it's possible that the assistant offensive line coach could be the guy that takes over if Huff was able to move up. The assistant offensive line coach in Seattle currently, and I think he's like 12 years in the league, or 12 years coaching. Well, you also got, of course, Jake Peets, who could also take over as offensive coordinator, because he is the passing game coordinator for Seattle currently. But I'm not too sure if he got rolled out or not. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, there's just all kinds of thoughts here that is going through my mind. Why are they waiting so long to finally name who's the person that's going to be taking the offensive coordinator position? And Brandon Nugent. Brandon Nugent is the other guy that is very possible to take over as the offensive line coach should they move Huff up to the offensive coordinator position. He was the offensive line coach for the Chargers prior to coming to Seattle, so he's got some experience in the NFL in that position, so that's very possible. But, if you're thinking about it, getting back to Huff and why that makes sense, again, first of all, you kept him, and I was wondering why they kept him on the roster, knowing full well that pretty much whoever becomes the next coordinator is going to be bringing his own team in, including an offensive line coach that's available. But he knows the culture. Scott Huff knows the culture in Seattle. He knows John Schneider well. He knows the Seahawks culture. He knows what Mike Mack is looking for, and he knows the Washington Huskies offensive game plan. He was coaching along with Grubb for 7 years before coming to Seattle, or many years before coming to Seattle. And so, maybe there was definitely just a personality difference between Grubb and Mike Mack, period. Maybe, Schneider and McDonald both loved the playbook. They loved the scheme that was being run at the University of Washington. And so now you just need somebody to lead it. You need somebody to coach it. You need somebody to bring the new guys along and free agents and draft picks along. And maybe that's the guy that you tap on the shoulder as a contingency after, if you lose out on Fraley, you lose out on a Kubiak, you lose out on all these guys because guess what? Coach Carroll's looking at those guys right now. You look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're looking for offensive coordinators. You got all these other, Dallas Cowboys going to name their head coach here pretty soon, and they're going to be looking for an OC. So, the longer Seattle waits, the less chances you're going to get the guys that you already interviewed. And so it's possible that they're waiting for, the Andy Hecks to get available, the Cromers, all the other guys, the Bobby Johnsons, the Stoutlands that are available after they play their last game of the season for them to choose. But if they lose out on those guys, you got maybe the possibility of somebody in-house as your contingency plan, and probably could have had them tapped on the shoulder a long time ago, but you wanted to have that time with these coaches to see if they might be a good fit. So that's my thought, you guys. It's very possible that that's why they're waiting. I'm looking at Twitter. I keep, trying to refresh to see what's going on today. Pretty big day in the NFL, though, and just, seeing how all these guys are panning out. It looks like the Texans are moving on from their offensive coordinator, Slowick. Okay, let's add him to the list. I just got that. Ian Rappaport just posted that about a minute ago. That maybe that's who Seattle wanted all along. Maybe they knew that that's possible, that the Texans were going to move on from Slowick. He was somebody that Seattle had on their short list of possibly being a head coach in Seattle. So regardless of all this, you guys, and I keep saying this, is that I believe that the Seahawks are going to have a top 10 defense next year in the NFL, not just the NFC. They're leaning that way. They're moving that direction. They're a few pieces away from it being, they got to get Ernest Jones and other guys re-signed, Jaron Reed, which I know that they'll do. Now it's a matter of just adding a few more pieces to the puzzle that can solidify that defense as a top 10 defense in the NFL. So what does that mean? If you've got a top 10 defense in the NFL, and now you're looking for somebody to be at the helm of the offense who's already got the pieces, and of course there's all these talks about DK being traded, and what's going on with Geno, and is he going to be traded to the Vegas Raiders and all this stuff, right? I don't think any of that's going to happen. It's going to be pretty much status quo, I believe, on offense. And now you're just adding pieces in the draft and free agency. We're going to bolster that offensive line. I think they're going to Seattle has a very good chance with sort of a softer schedule next year to win 12, 13 games. I'm already going to call it already. 12, 13 game winners next year, probably compete for the NFC West along with the 49ers and the Rams. That's going to always be a juggernaut there. And don't forget the Cardinals. I'm not forgetting about them either. They're looking pretty solid too. I think that you're going to need to at least have two guys on your offensive coordinator room. And I still like that idea of having two guys sort of do a mix. Why an Andy Heck makes sense as your offensive coordinator, and bringing in a passing game guy makes a lot of sense. You can bring Slowick in now that he's not with the Texans, and basically now you've got the Seahawks in a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense, and now they're getting further into the playoffs, and now Slowick jumps ship because, again, he's been on the short list for a lot of teams for their head coaching position. What if now he moves on? Now you still are stuck a year later trying to find your offensive coordinator. So, again, because of the success that Seattle is going to have next year, in my opinion, you're going to have at least one guy as your offensive coordinator, but somebody waiting in the wings to take over. And that's kind of why Scott Huff makes a lot of sense. Nobody's got him on the short list. He's got the playbook for the Huskies. But again, I think they're going to kick the tires on Slowick. They're going to kick the tires on Heck, or whoever gets ousted this weekend. It will be the next round of of interviews, and I think that it's going to be very again, they're not being they're not hastily making the decision on the offensive coordinator position, which I am so happy they're not. But there comes a time where you're going to have to make a decision, Schneider. You're going to lose out on some of the guys that I talked about. But again, I guess they're not worried about that too much because you do have a Scott Huff, who I think could take over as offensive coordinator, who knows the playbook like the back of his hand. You've got a assistant offensive lines coach that could move up as the OC or as the offensive lines coach in Seattle. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Is my biggest take from all this. But anyway, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining me. We'll see what happens. Let's see how it all shakes out. I'm excited. Either way, go Hawks! Happy Blue Friday, I guess, as in this off-season edition of Blue Friday. Take care, guys.